Okay, welcome to the fourth episode of Chords for Ukulele Beginners. This episode is going to extend what we did in episode 3. It's also going to show you some more two-finger chords and a couple of one-finger chords. These are still fairly common chords that you'll come up against, although the back end of this video is likely to show you some chords that you might not come up against, but they're still pretty cool chords. Learn the chords when you need them. So when I say that, I mean don't just learn all these chords from memory and then have no context. It's really important that when you come up against a chord you don't know, that's when you learn it. Right? You don't learn phone numbers by memorizing the phone book. You learn phone numbers when somebody gives you one. It's the same thing with chords. It's the same thing with notes on the fretboard. When you encounter something you don't know, add that to the bank of knowledge, and you will slowly build up as you go. Come back and look at these videos and other material as reference guides if you're wondering about how they should sound or how to play them. All right, so from our last episode, the three-finger chords, a couple that I left out, which are fairly common, are the F minor chord. Start with your index finger, place it on the first fret of the fourth string, that's an A flat. Have an open C string or third string. First finger on the first fret of the second string is F. And then take your pinky up onto the third fret of the first string, and that's F minor. Another minor we're going to look at is F sharp minor. Now F sharp minor is a derivative of A. So start with the A chord, which is a two-finger chord. You'll remember index finger on the first fret of the third string, second finger on the second fret of the fourth string. Then with your middle finger, also on the second fret, but on the second string, you have F sharp minor. So back to A, by lifting my my ring finger, putting ring finger back down, I have F sharp minor. Okay, there's also a three-finger E chord. Now, I'm not a big fan of a three-finger E chord, but there are people who use it, so I'll show it to you. E has got an E, a G sharp, and a B in it. So here is a G sharp on the first fret of the fourth string. In two chords ago we called this A flat. Now we're going to call it G sharp, enharmonically, in other words sounding exactly the same in both cases. We come across with our second finger and put it on the second fret of the first string. So we have two fingers fretted so far. Then with our pinky, come across onto the fourth fret of the C string or third string, and there's our E chord. I'm not a big fan, as I say, of that chord. I think it's quite a difficult chord to get to and come away from. But don't shy away from E. That's one way of playing it. There are lots of other ways to play it as well. We can do another three-finger version. It's hard to strum this one, but if you take your middle two fingers and place it on the middle two strings at the fourth fret. So there we are, the middle two fingers, middle two strings, and index finger on the first string, second fret. But don't play this fourth string. That's an E triad. Bit hard to strum this one because you've got that open G. You would need to mute that somehow. Probably with your thumb, but again, not a great chord unless you're going to be just rolling in a chord melody or something similar. The other E that I would be going for would be to put all three fingers down on the fourth fret on the fourth, third and second strings, and come across with your index finger on the second fret of the first string. You can do it that way, or as I like to do it because I've got sort of bendy fingers, you can triple stop the fourth fret on the fourth, third and second strings and use your index finger on the B. All right, that's E, a bit more than I wanted to talk about. G minor 7. So we start with our G minor chord. If you remember from the last video, we have our index finger on the B flat, which is the first fret of the first string. On the second fret of the third string, we use our second finger. Then our third finger on the third fret of the second string is G minor. To get to G minor 7, we need to add a F. Now we can use our pinky up here on the fifth fret on the C string. That's okay. But an easier way probably for you is to bar the second fret. Bar the first two strings at the first fret with your index finger. Take your index finger across to the third string second fret, and that's a G minor 7. So we have an open 4th string. Remembering I'm using C6 tuning, high G ukulele. It'll work on a low G ukulele as well. All right, let's move on and have a look at some more unusual chords, but they're still out there. The first one is C5. Now there's a few C variants I'm going to show you here. C5, any 5 chord for that matter, is also known as a power chord. It is a chord that doesn't have a third in it. So in the sequence of normal chords that you will encounter in your beginner trip, you will have chords that are built on the 1st, 3rd and 5th degrees of the scale, or they'll use those notes rather. So C, for example, should have C, not D, E, not F, and G. C5 doesn't have that E in it. It's just the 1st and the 5th degree. Now we play that on our first 2 strings at the 3rd fret. You can use either your index and middle finger or your middle finger and ring finger. And you get that sort of hollow sound. Slide it back 2 frets towards this headstock. So you're on the 1st fret now. We have another C chord. This one is a C7. You can see there's the C7. But we suspend the 3rd. In other words, we raise the 3rd up to give us a suspended 4. So this is a C7 sus4. Sounds really complicated, only 2 fingers, right? Now that's a really common chord in songs like, for example, Norwegian Wood. All right? It's also in a lot of other songs. You might even see it on in other keys that do things like this. Right? There's a few other things in there, but it starts with a power chord anyway. Still on the C variants, we have a C9. Now a 9th chord is often a substitute for a 7th chord in jazz. A lot of jazz players won't, when they see a 7th, like a dominant 7th, a C7, F7, or a D7, they'll play the 9th version of it because it just sounds jazzier. You can just play, if you see a 9th, you can actually just play the 7th and you'll get away with it. But here's a common one, it's a C9. We start with our C7 again. We need to add a D, which is the 9th. So we come across on the 2nd fret with our 2nd finger of the 3rd string, and there's our C9. Like the C7, it wants to go to F. So C9 wants to go to F. So if you're playing a 12-bar blues, you might substitute the C9 for the C7. Then instead of going to the F7, you might go to the F9. Back to the C9. So there's a whole lot of things you can do with 9th chords. They're lots of fun, but that's an easy 2-finger way. C9. Another common one, F major 7. Now, F major 7 in 1st position is a bugger of a chord. It's right down here. It's all 4 fingers. It's basically the F chord with a C on the top and an E on the C string. Now, that's a really cool chord, and I love that voicing, but there's another way of playing exactly the same thing. That's by taking 2 fingers. Again, don't mind whether you use your 1st and 2nd finger or your 2nd and 3rd finger. I'm going to use my 2nd and 3rd, up on the 5th fret, on the 4th and 3rd strings. So you can see there, just 2 fingers, 2nd and 3rd fingers on the 5th fret on the 3rd and 4th strings. F major 7. A lot easier than playing down the bottom. Right, next is a C7 variant again. This is called the C7 sharp 5. We start with a C7. Now, if you recall, I said a C chord is C, E, G. So G is the 5th. We want to sharpen the 5th. The 5th over here is G. We can sharpen it by adding 1 fret to it. So we make the 1st fret on the 4th string. Now you can play it as I did then by coming across and all the way across with your 2nd finger, or you can come across with these 2 fingers. That's entirely up to you. It also is dependent upon where you've come from and where you're going to in terms of chord progressions as to which fingers you actually use there. All right, there are 3 more very quickly. Less common, much less common, a D add 11. You take 2 fingers. I would take the 1st and 2nd finger, place them on the middle 2 strings, on the second fret. That is a D at 11. Now, it's a really cool chord in this context. C5, D at 11, G chord, E minor, C5, so you can see it has a real purpose in that song. Probably won't come across it that often though, but it is a cool chord. 2 or 3 others very quickly. If you take that D at 11 and move it up 1 fret, so we're now in the middle 2 strings on the third fret. We have a G, E flat, another G, and an A. You get away by calling that a C minor 6. It has other names, but C minor 6 is common in this case. Then we have 2 others, E sus 4. So an E chord would normally be E, G sharp, B. If we suspend the G sharp, in other words, we raise it up, we make the G sharp an A, we end up with this chord, and there's lots of ways of playing this again, but I'm just going to use my middle 2 fingers on the 4th fret of the 3rd and 4th strings. So there you go there. If you take that fingering and move down 2 frets to the 2nd fret, so still on the 4th and 3rd strings, we have an A sus 4. We could take a finger off the 4th string, and we have an A7 suspended 4th. 1 finger. Now, lots of chords in there. Those last couple, the only reason I show you those is because if you join them up with the first ones I showed you, which were F sharp minor and A chord, then you'll get this. Right, Wonderwall from Oasis. All right, enjoy it. There's lots there, a lot of stuff you probably don't need either, but I think that sort of rounds off a lot of the common chords you'll come up against as beginners. Please look at the other videos in terms of movable shapes, and as I say, there are lots of other ways of playing these chords. I mean, I didn't mention D7 is a common D chord, but again, that's a movable shape. You can look at that in the movable chords videos. Lots of stuff to do. Enjoy it, and we'll see you around. Bye now.